have it recorded so you can reference it. And also so that we have other people that will not be able to attend, that they can have access to this as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about having access to this towards the end of this presentation, so you can feel free to do that as well. So, so once again, welcome so much. We trust that this session will be very value add for all of you. Thank you for your time this morning. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you 4 elements of our presentation, provide you a little background on who we are, Leading North Advisors, but more importantly, we're going to talk about a case study that presents to you some of the work that we did with Reconfig as it relates to lean enterprise transformation and organizational design. Then Reconfig is going to spend a few minutes. They're going to also spend some time sharing with you their business model, as well as a demo that will kind of bring together the data analytics aspect of this work that we did with them. Towards the end, we're going to do some Q&A, some interactive Q&A with all of you. So we'll talk a little bit on how that's going to look like. Just some housekeeping, some guidelines for us. All of us, all of you as participants will be a muted function. This is to kind of prevent some of the background noise. However, there will be, at the end, we're going to have a session for Q&A. So throughout the session, as we present, if you have any questions or comments, use the chat. Those of you that are not familiar with Zoom, on the bottom right-hand side, you see these 3 little dots where it says more. If you click on that, you'll see chat. You click on that, and then it'll open up a little window on the right where you can type in your question or comment and hit enter, and it'll be posted. At the end of the session, when we finish presenting, we're going to allow about 20 minutes to do some Q&A, and we're going to pull questions from the chat as you type those up. It'll also be interactive, so we'll also, if as time allows, if you have a specific question you'd rather voice, then we'll ask you to raise your hand, and also again on the bottom of your screen you'll see the little happy faces reaction. You click on that, then you raise your hand, and that'll prompt us also to select you to answer your question and talk through that piece of it. So again, we'll follow that process as we go through our session today. So a little bit of myself. I've been around the business for a few years. I was mentored within that Toyota group. A lot of my learnings and teachings came from there, and I was blessed to work in various industries that allowed me to continue to learn and evolve and learn the best practices. We worked with several organizations, some of the bigger ones and the smaller ones as well, in different aspects of their enterprise transformation, from supply chain, manufacturing operations, leadership aspect, the strategy, and so forth. So that's some background on myself. Leading North Advisors, we started in 2016. We support clients in North America and Latin America. For European clients, we have partners in Europe that helps us also for companies that have operations in Europe. Languages, those are kind of what we master here in this North American region. We're officed out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and we help small as well as multinational clients. Services, emphasis is lean enterprise transformation. We do a lot of business turnaround work with clients. We focus on consulting, advisory services, as well as analytical support of our clients and their needs. On the left-hand side, some of the industries we serve. Again, just to give you a synopsis of what are the areas that we support. On the right-hand side, some of the clients that we currently are helping, as well as some of our past clients, just to give you also a perspective of who uses our services, as well as some of the work that we'll present here and how we use that with them. So, next slide here. So we selected a client case, that would bring in the power of lean enterprise transformation, but also marry with data analytics. I think this was it was important for us to highlight this to you, because this is something that we're starting to dive deeper with our clients in terms of how do we harness data analytics and AI to further speed up and their enterprise transformation. So I want to give you this aspect, this case study here. So the company was in the energy sector. They're interesting case was it was a little bit of a merger. What they did is they had a big enterprise, and they had two big business units that were merging together within the organization, which presented many challenges for them, and also obviously many opportunities for them as well. Some of the challenges, if you think from a business case perspective, they were struggling so when they asked us to come in, they had already started the process. They were already at least a year or so into this merging of business units and departments. As they were going through this process, they had some struggles. One of them was achieving clarity in the roles and responsibilities between the two organizations that were coming together. There was a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, and that was a challenge that they encountered. Lack of ownership was a big one as well. Who owns what in terms of resolving issues that came out on the field, that came up with the customer internal issues, that also presented a challenge for them. The question that we always ask is centralized versus decentralized. What's better? That was another factor that they needed to leverage. There's pros and cons, decentralized and centralized. So what's the best? What was the best balance as obviously from a decision-making perspective and support? Consistent understanding and alignment on roles and responsibilities. Again, it was the clarity as to who was responsible for what also presented a big challenge, and people weren't sure anymore if they were responsible to do certain things or not. So that was a big one. And the one that, as I mentioned, they had been doing some work with it, some really good work, by the way. So it wasn't like that things were not all aligning properly, but there were also many challenges that were inhibiting them from being successfully running the business. One of the big ones was not being able to properly or seamlessly implement the new flows that came with this merger, which really complicated a lot of the value add that flows in the business. So that was a little bit of a challenge that they had as they went through this. So the challenge that was presented to us, there's a lot of dynamics in this that were taking place in this business. So we had to make sure, and we had to be sensitive to the work that was done previously, the culture of the organization that was within the two organizations, as well as the deliverables and the timing, because the timing was very critical to them. We didn't have 2-3 years to do this. It was a matter of months that we had to make this happen. One of our biggest challenges that was presented is similar departments, meaning that they kind of did the same thing, but at the same time, some departments did something else that the other department didn't do. And how do you differentiate? How do you move the players, the pieces around? That was a challenge that was in front of us. This was not a company that sat in their four walls. This was people that worked all across North America in different teams. So they were all spread out, but yet they worked as one. Very efficient organization. However, that also had its challenges. Functions, again, centralized and decentralized functions in the business. What some of the functions were centralized, and the question was, should they continue to be centralized? Some were decentralized. Should they be centralized? And so that was something that was up a lot of questions in leadership's mind. And then to look at that, you have to look at different layers of people. You got the leadership component of it, the different people that reported to who ran what, who's responsible for what. You had the technical support, or people on the field, the technical services. They were under teams, and should they continue to be under certain teams, and support functions, quality, program management, you name it. There was all different. Not that everything had to change, but we had to make sure that everything was properly aligned and channels of communication was clear. The big one as well was the culture, because we're talking not only the culture of the business over the previous decades that they worked, but now these two organizations that they had a different culture. They even had different continuous improvement philosophies, if you will. So there was the culture aspect was a big one. We couldn't as any enterprise transformation, that's something we have to be very, very sensitive, which is a key component to successful transformation and sustaining the efforts. So we knew that value stream improvement was critical to this, but it was part of the solution. And this is where we understood that the design of the organization was central to making, to achieving the objectives of the business. Now we looked at the different value stream flows, and we look at those as, this is how the business should be run, this is how the units should be operating, but what is the organizational design behind that? So we knew that it had to be data-driven. We made sure that we understood what AI, artificial intelligence, could do for us to develop this design. This is when we looked to our partners, Reconfig, because they are experts at that. We looked at a couple other organizations, and these guys knew the game, and they had the experience to be able to help us go through that. We didn't have time to experiment through this process. We didn't have that luxury. So we had to go in quickly running with it. So organizational design was a key component, a key deliverable to our value stream improvement work for the merging of these units. So our approach, by the way, all the work that we did with this company was all virtual. There was no boots on the ground, which was actually very efficient, but presented its challenges that between Reconfig and ourselves, we're able to seamlessly overcome for the client and very successfully go through that piece of it. We use A3 thinking. For those of you, A3 basically is a sheet of paper one sheet of paper where you put your strategy on how where are we now and what needs to be achieved within the year period, within the lifetime of this project. So we use A3 thinking. We use value stream analysis as a key component to define the flows of the business, the key flows. We partner with Reconfig, and this is a big one, obviously, to understand the design and the structure of the business to align with the future value streams. So that also was a key component. So the first thing, and I'm just going to walk you through this very quickly. First thing we did, first and foremost, before we did anything, is we held an A3 strategy session with the executive leadership. It was very important that we understood boundaries, framework, the deliverables from them, from a performance perspective as well as from a cultural perspective. And it was also an opportunity to educate the leadership because they had to know what this model entailed and what's that going to look like going forward. So that was a big piece. That get alignment from all the stakeholders as to what's going to happen and the level of support that we need to go forward with this. We utilize value stream analysis to understand the current process flows, evaluate it to identify the key waste, because we can fix everything, but what are the key drivers for us to be successful in this endeavor? And any redundancies, because there was a lot of redundancies, a lot of variability in the business. So we had to also address that and develop that future state. Again, that was part of that solution. And it wasn't just about what are the future state flows need to look like for us to be successful, but what's it going to take from a people perspective to drive that. And this is where Reconfig AI modeling tool helped us arrive to this design and support this future value stream. So they had to go hand in hand, and we didn't have the luxury to experiment with different organizational structures. They helped us do different modeling activities to find the one that aligned better with that value stream future state. Define new departments, roles and responsibilities. That's once the design, we selected a model that we're going to use. New departments, how to be not necessarily created, improved and adjusted. Roles and responsibilities, how to be also created for the organization. Again, it was all virtual improvement activity that we did. Leadership development, very heavy on change management and organizational design activity. So we had to also get the leadership ready as we went through this process. So by the way, throughout this exercise, it wasn't a secret. Everybody was involved with it, and our job was to educate everyone. So the fear of change was not a factor as we went through it. And again, people were engaged. It wouldn't work without the engagement of the people. Last but not least is at the end of, as we went through this process, the flows were simplified, projected to achieve 50 to 80% improvement on some of the lead time, and of course, reduce some of the double-digit improvements in the business. So this is a typical model that you guys have seen. So I kind of explained this in a bit here. Is that this is the true north, the deliverables of the business. This is what they wanted to achieve from a performance perspective. We went in there, we looked at the current state, we defined what this future state is going to look like, identify waste, variability, redundancies in this process using value stream analysis tool. We went ahead and looked at different lean vehicles to improve it, tools and techniques. But the big one is we could not forget again is what is a design of the organization that's going to help us sustain and achieve that. That was, again, a big driver to our partnership with Reconfig and making sure that we added that piece of the puzzle to this transformation effort of this client. So from an approach perspective, again, just want to just draw you a quick picture here, is we used Reconfig data analytics to evaluate how they're currently structured, and based on that structure, what is that different type of structures that they should be considering. Again, this is just that they would provide us these models for us to consider. In parallel to that, our team of consultants were also doing the value stream analysis work. And the value stream analysis work was, in fact, we said, no, we don't want to see your org structure. We don't, it's not even about the departments. We just want to see what's the value that runs across your enterprise, in this case, what we scoped out. And and we selected 4 key value streams that were significant big drivers in their business. And we looked at those and we defined these future state value streams, not, putting aside the departments, putting aside the org structure, is what does a business need to look like? And so as we did that, we developed that mapping exercise as well as Reconfig analytics. And we evaluated, the Reconfig model didn't just give us a model to say, here, use that, but rather gives you 2-3 models that we were able to evaluate against this new future state. And based on that, with the leadership, we started to evaluate and analyze the opportunities within that, and what makes sense, and and you don't have to do everything at once. We took it in phases to make sure that we got to where they need to be from an organizational design perspective. And that's where this last piece comes in. So we said based on the recommendations and the modeling of Reconfig, as well as our mapping activities, we made some adjustments. We took a model from Reconfig, actually a couple of different models, and we made some minor adjustments to it to fit better the future state value streams, but 80%, 90% of what Reconfig provided from a modeling perspective hit the nail in terms of how they should be organized. So that was a big piece of how it allows us to further understand that right people, the right leaders, the right support functions were aligned to support this new value stream organization that the team came up with. And so that was part of it. The second piece of it was, of course, optimizing the staffing utilization. Again, this was done virtual based on the departments that were selected. And we said, these people should work in this department, this person should work here, whichever. And as we did that, we realized that there were some departments that people had too much on their plate, other people did not have enough on their plate. We did this analysis with every single person that was involved in this exercise. And again, this was all virtual. But based on that, we start to balancing the staffing. Once the players were in place in the right chairs, we developed roles and responsibilities. And this is an exercise we did with them. It wasn't just the leadership in a room. And then, of course, people some of them needed new skills or a certain training to happen. So we want to make sure that was in place. So it wasn't just given a new position without the proper training and development. So again, we The execution of it was with a number of improvement teams that we did virtually throughout North America. We used many different tools from a virtual perspective that facilitated the exercise. And at the end, they were very, very content and worked out really well. By the way, no one, even though there were staffing improvements and productivity improvements, there was no layoffs. The people that we freed up were moved to continuous improvement. So actually, they started to put a full-time continuous improvement team to continue to drive these activities on their own going forward after we did some coaching and development. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Tim. So Tim can provide you a little bit more context of Reconfig, their model, and then, of course, hopefully provide you that insight. So.
Thank you, Steve. Before I start, there were two questions actually by our friend from Belgium, Jeroen. One was simple, one is a little bit harder. So I'd like to postpone the second question to after Kim has presented. But the first question was, how long did the exercise take?
I'm sorry, that's
the question for you,
that
Steve?
was for me. I'm sorry. Okay, the exercise. Yeah. Well, the whole activity, I couldn't break it down into timeframes right now, but the whole activity it took us about a year to go from the A3 strategy all the way until the execution of the improvement activities. So about a year, within 90 days, we had the model defined and designed, and then we started to execute against that with some adjustments.
Thank you. The other question, Jeroen, we'll have to wait until Kim has presented the actual tool, because that's about the data model. So I'm excited to be here, Steve, virtually to be on the west coast of the US. I've also seen some people that are even further remote from India, Dubai, and we have our friends from Belgium and one person extra from the Netherlands as well, where I'm based. So I'll quickly talk you through the background of Reconfig, designing the future of your organization. But already telling you, we are just a tool, and the tool can only provide value in the hands of a skilled organization designer, and that's Steve and his team leading North Advisors. So the company Reconfig was founded in 2018 by three guys. This is Professor Nikolai Warren. This is Torres, got his PhD from Stanford, where he did a lot of work on process optimization. And this is Kim, our CTO, and he'll speak and he'll show the actual thing on the screen. So he'll do the demo. I only joined in 2020. I'm the CEO of the company. So that means that I'm supposed to build relationships and sell the software. But it's great fun to work with a small team based out of Norway, and I'm based in the Netherlands here. So most importantly, what we have is, of course, the software, but also the network. So here you see a worldwide network of people that are currently working with us. Here you see somebody that's also in the room, actually. That's Peter in Belgium. But this is Steve here on the West Coast. So these people are all using our tool for designing better organizations. So our purpose is actually to support business leader and management consultants to meet the demands of the current world. And you're talking about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we're doing that through best practices and data analytics. So here's already a screenshot of our tool. You can see the four modules: diagnose, define, discover, design. You can see the mathematics here. But the thing is, we're using a decision structured matrix. So Kim will show you how it really works, but you already get a feel of it, that here you see roles, here you see roles, and then you can see who's working with whom on what. And that's kind of the secret sauce that we have. We can help by sending a survey, the designer, to have a very clear view on the actual organization, but also on the desired organization. So our vision is that organizations exist to turn strategy into performance. And designing high-performing organizational systems actually require art and science. So it's about data science, it's about a tool, but it's also about the experience and the judgment of the designer. So this is a quote from somebody in Denmark. And we take that very close to our heart, that data is only one way of looking at reality. The other way is really talking with people. And as Steve already mentioned, there's a lot of judgment involved as well. But judgment alone is dangerous. Data alone is also dangerous, but the two together are very powerful. So that's what was clear from the case that Steve presented, and we'll show you on the screen with the real tool. So what we do is taking organization design to the next level. And there are three pillars: stakeholders, the approach, and the use of data analytics. So if you were in organization design, you've all seen that situation where there's an autocratic leader, CEO goes on holiday, he comes back and he says, well, this is how we're going to do it. And then as a change manager, you're just faced with a blueprint that needs to be implemented. So there's no process, there's just somebody that says, do it like this. I personally always walk away from that situation because it's very difficult and very, very hard to actually create a positive change in the organization with a very autocratic leader. So then there's the other side where somebody says, my door is always open. So lots of involvement, a lot of talking, but no process to capture the actual data. So we like working with professionals that have a structured approach, like Steve, that can document the current organization, generate multiple alternatives, set the criteria, make a final blueprint, and then create a sequence of incremental changes. And what we do actually is we help with analytical tools to make the right decisions. If you want, we can share the screens. There is here a blog by Professor Nicolai, Organization Design Net, that you can have a look at. But that's basically where we play and where we want to help people that are already good to even get better with analytical tools. So the problem we solve, organizations are bombarded with information, and the people in it suffer from coordination and information overload. There's increasing complexity because of all the demands on organizations, and we call that 21st century sustainability challenges. But what it really means is that you don't only are accountable towards your client, but also to society at large and the planet. So what we see that if you want to do all of this right, you need a better process to create better organizations. So less intuitive, more data-driven, less political, more strategic. And we see a lot of need for transparency, which is where we help as well. So helping leaders to collaborate in an increasingly complex network world. This is a screenshot of the book by one of our founders, Nicolai. But where we actually try to focus is the future. So we try to design for the future, which means that certain things are standardized and will get automated. This is like run the business, this is change the business, and we are in the business of changing the business. If you want, there's a link, I will send you the deck if you're interested about changing structures. So back to the software. Our tool consists of 4 modules. And as Steve was already saying, you first always need to talk about what is the actual pain in the organization, what's the ambition, what is it that needs to be changed. And it's not always clear initially, because there could be a leader and he says, well, Steve, can you help me to merge my organization? But then Steve would say, well, sure, but first I need to talk with some key stakeholders, I need to do the analysis, etc. So it's really about identifying the key design challenge. And our tools provides the support to do exactly that. So have consensus around what is the problem you want to solve. Then we go into defining like the strategy, facilitating a top-down approach. So this is the to-be stage, and Kim will show you how that works in the tool. But basically, it is about what is your purpose, your mission, what are your required capabilities, and how do you break that up into activities, responsibilities, laying the foundation for the ultimate design. But what we always do first, and that's already with a few screenshots by Steve, is we are looking at the current situation, the as-is situation. So who's working with whom on what? And if you do that for a bigger organization, you have a wealth of data about interdependencies between teams in the organization. And then you can optimize either the current situation, or you can say, well, I want to change the current situation based on the high-level design. But then at least you know what there is to be changed. So we blend kind of the top-down and the bottom-up approach. And ultimately, of course, it's in the hands of Steve and his people to design a better organization with the help of the AI engine. So you can set parameters to generate alternative designs. Based on your parameters, you'll have various scenarios. And then you can still say, well, that's great. Computer has given me some inspiration. But as a human designer, I need to take into account some human factors, which means that I'm still going to override the design that has been generated by Reconfig. So this is the full circle. And then typically you want to evaluate, and maybe you want to go multiple circles like this. So let me go a little bit more detail. The diagnose is about your score against a certain norm. So this is a 5-point scale. We're quite flexible on how to do this, but we're using Gould & Gamble as our template here. So purpose means, are people focused and motivated to deliver on the organizational big goals? Now, in this case, this was an actual case that we've been working on. These people were working for the government, and they were really happy with their job. They didn't earn a lot of money, but they were really happy with doing meaningful work. So alignment around the big goal was totally fine. That was a 5. Capabilities, are your people grouped to focus on delivering, on building specific capabilities that are needed to deliver on your purpose? Was also okay for. But then we went to horizontal linking. So our people grouped together to ultimately be helping each other through horizontal links. That was kind of a problem. They couldn't find each other. So that's lower. And then we have the hierarchy, is the hierarchical role set up so to coordinate and coach the people. Was also not so great. The people itself were motivated, but the accountabilities were also not that brilliant. So in this particular case, you see here that the blue line is like the norm. You're great with purpose, but you're failing with linking and hierarchy and accountability. So that's the standards for a test. When you do this, you will also lay the foundation for later setting up Reconfig and interpreting the results. When we go to the next module, it's about defining your organization. So you start with, this is an example of an insurance company. So providing security and protection is the higher level purpose, the higher level mission. And then you break it down into the various functions. So what needs to be done? Well, you need to develop attractive products and offering. You need to maximize your premium income, but you also need to respectfully settle claims, balancing satisfaction and your ethical norms and costs. Once you got this, you got to break these things down into actual activities. So that's one layer down. Kim will show you in the system how that works. And then you also can do the high-level responsibilities already. And once you do this in the system, you can start even this as a high-level design. So you can say, let me design based on these high-level functions. Or you can go to the next one, which is discover, which means that you're going to look how people are actually collaborating in the current organization. And as what we always see, it's quite messy. You see that this unit here is depending on the input from this unit here, but there is something in between here, and then this one is depending on this one here. So this is what Steve meant when he showed you already those pictures of collaboration within your organization. So that's your as-is status. But then there's a button in our software that says, okay, fine, if this is your current situation, then you can let Reconfig optimize, and then the computer generates an alternative design, which could look something like this. So you're grouping roles according to the processes. And these processes can be the actual processes, or there can be manually inserted into the system. So you can design for the future, which means that you need to do a bit of work to think through the high-level design. You can also say, well, I've got a current organization and I'm going to let Reconfig work based on the current patterns of collaboration. I'm going to give you very quickly one example that clarifies the mathematical algorithm behind it. So that's A is working with E, B is working with C, C is working with D, etc. You get the picture. And now the question is that if there are like a maximum 3 people in a team, who should be placed on the same team? Well, this is a classic thing for, this is a classic thing for organization design. And the answer is very simple. I'm going to give it away now. Otherwise, I would ask 2 or 3 minutes of your time because you would be able as a human person to solve this. But the answer is F, E, and A are going to be placed in the same team. C, B, and D are also going to be placed in the same team. And now you got a linking pin here, Edwards and Greg, and they have something in common. Now, you as a human designer could do this with sticky notes on your desk. And if you like, I have a link for something that's a little bit more complicated. We call it a challenge. I'm warning you, if you're going to do that challenge, you might suffer some sleep. You might offer some sleep because it is addictive. But the computer does it in a very specific way through the decision structured matrix. And this is where our intellectual property lives. It's actually conceptually quite simple. You put the roles on the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. And then if there is a colored field, and when Kim shows you, it's going to be much more complicated, but basically it means here that B is providing input to C. And now we have something that a computer can work with because it's called a matrix. And you have all the intensity of the relationship, how critical this is, how often people are working together, etc. But this is really the basis of how Reconfig works. So either you put those marks in manually, or you say, I'm going to look at the current organization. But the beauty is if you have this, you say, let Reconfig optimize, you get something like this. So this is how it really looks. You got from one team organization, you have a blue team and a red team. And this is something that you as a human could do in 3 minutes and the computer can do it in 2 seconds. Now it gets more interesting if you have an organization, and this is a real case of around 60 people. So now, good luck, you will not be able to find any satisfying solution anymore if you're just working with sticky notes and PowerPoint. And that's where the beauty of Reconfig is, that it takes away time out of that it makes you more productive, and you're not having to spend so much time on the sticky notes and all of that. So with Reconfig, you have the best practices and the analytical engine. So you can focus on what really matters, which is facilitating a people transformation, a transformation of the organization. So with that, I would like to invite you to take the challenge at reconfig.no. So this is our website. As I said, don't spend too much time there, but you get a flavor of how it works. But first, let's watch the demo by our CTO, Kim Soldal. So Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tim. Great introduction there. Going to share the screen like that. All right. So yes, I'm Kim. I'm the CTO of Reconfig. Spending most of my time building the software, working with partners like Steve, Peter, and the others around the world that Tim showed you before, to make sure that we have the functionality and analysis that you guys need. I'm going to show you exactly what we do now. So Reconfig is set up as an entirely cloud-based service. And to get started, it's the fascinating hard job of getting a login, and then you're ready to go. So there's no integration or anything in this. So as long as you're have an account for the system, you're ready to start your project. And to Tim's point, we have 4 modules here. Luckily, he already went through what they are, so I'll just show you what this looks like in Reconfig. So I'll quickly go through the first 3 and get to the meat of the use cases and the value we generate after you do this this work. So the first module is the diagnose module, where you can reach out to all the stakeholders of an organization and get their input on what the main improvement areas of an organization really is. You'll see a table down here with the actual assessments that we do. There's 6 of them. And as Tim was pointing out, this I have a Justice Department data set here, which is an actual client that we have, and of course anonymized, so that we're able to show you the patterns without revealing anything actually sensitive. And in this case, they were, like Tim said, doing really well on purpose and big goals. They really felt the drive to deliver on the vision of the government. They were dedicated to the job. But we found, for instance, among these assessments, I'm not going to go through all of them. We will be happy to do that in a separate call on case-by-case basis. But they were having issues with linking. So communication within the team was between teams and especially in the way they serve clients was a big issue. And they had a big issue with accountabilities. And I'm going to come back to you when we look at the actual data generated for this case on how we are really digging into and identifying the core issues of these 2 assessments when we get into the design module there. So here you'll essentially just upload a list of people to share the survey with. They will all respond, and this module is going to generate a report for you with a detailed diagnosis of this organization. So once you have mapped out and have a good definition of what the main improvement areas are, you have buy-in from the stakeholders, they all want to see this improvement, and they've all had the results shared back. We'll typically step into the define module. And in define, we focus on the strategy of the organization. What are you trying to achieve and how do you need to achieve it? So we have a mission, of course, as the common goal of the organization. What are you aiming for to get people aligned on the purpose of this organization? And the mission, in order to deliver on that mission and implement your strategy, there's a certain set of strategic functions or capabilities that your organization needs to deliver. That's what we list under functions. So for a Justice Department, for instance, of course, this is drafting legislation. They want to create laws. We have policy advice, legal advice, litigation, and so on. Of course, these functions are typically at a very strategic high level. So if you just tell your employees to tell us what they, or ask them to tell us what they spend their time on, this isn't going to be very detailed. So we recommend breaking this down into an activity level, which is typically more at the day-by-day work level. So for the Justice Department, in this case, they were essentially asking, what do our people actually spend their time on? We're not entirely sure how they operate. These are lawyers, so they're all very self-driven, self-motivated, they're independent workers. And the knowledge workers, they're not working in very structured processes. So they were unsure of what lawyers in the organization actually provided, for instance, legislation, litigation support, for instance, for educational affairs, environmental, and so on. So they decided that, you know what, let's take our internal stakeholders as parts of the government and ask, what do you actually spend your time on? Who do you help on what strategic function? And this was based off of the diagnosis that they knew they had an issue where questions were coming in. It was taking them something like 3 months to respond to a question. And the answer might be, you need to go to a different team, instead of actually sending that client request to a new team. So you had a typical support case nightmare, taking a long time. And when you finally get a response, you get the wrong response. Of course, this caused a lot of frustration. And this Justice Department really wanted to solve the problem. They wanted to improve in this area. And it came back to the linking assessment that we mentioned before. And it also came down to the mandate accountabilities assessments. Those were the two main areas we identified as the improvement areas to solve this critical customer satisfaction question or problem, you might say. So the activities here, I mean, here it's very client focused, but you might as well use a process-oriented activity list. You can use a brand-oriented, product-oriented, whichever dimension is important for the customer. And you know, it heavily depends on what type of organization they want to be. Here you actually have a justice department that's on the trend of becoming a market-oriented organization, which I found very fascinating. So once you have a function list and activity list, we typically break that down into a top-down design. I'm not sure if you noticed, but upper management tends to have a lot of opinions on how the organization should look. So the responsibilities matrix that we have here, we can use to essentially add units with certain responsibilities for different functions. We can break this down into activities and really do a detailed top-down design of this is how we envision that the organization is supposed to work. Now, once you've gone through that exercise, the next question, of course, becomes, great, but is this feasible? What does it take to implement such an organization? Are we sure this is the right answer? Right? All of these questions will surface. And there's a few ways to deal with it using Reconfig. One is we could just go from here and create a more detailed design, still top down, and we can add resources to these different units. We can really build up the organization. But the way we recommend doing this is to go instead to create survey, which will bring us into the Discover module. Now, if you create a Discover survey here, you're going to ask people in the organization, what do you do? Who do you depend on? And how important is all this for you in order for you to do your job in the organization? And you'll see here that the activity list here, the functions and activities, are already filled out. There's 57 of them. All you need to do is essentially add in a participant list of who do you need to respond to the survey. Now, this could be every single employee in the organization. It could be a representative of a team. Let's say all the team leads respond on behalf of their team. It could be department heads, you know, that kind of thing. So it's flexible in terms of the level of detail you want about the organization. And of course, you are able to adapt customize the survey by including your own first page of the survey, providing context to the respondents. You can modify the email invitation and so forth. So once this is done, you'll send the survey. Now, luckily, we already did that, so I'll just jump out and into one that is already completed. So this Justice Department responded, and we got 34 out of 43 responses from this unit. And you'll see we have data here on who has responded, who's remaining. We have all the job titles. We know what team they're part of, that kind of thing. So once you have all the responses gathered, we can now go and create a design. And I'll just create one from scratch here. So this is their current organization. You'll see they have a legislative council office, litigation group, solicitors group. They have a very functionally oriented organization, or they used to. And in here, you'll see that each card is a person. Currently, we print the name here. We can add in their job title and get more information, but I'll stick with name. And if you click a person, you'll see who they are communicating with. Who do they have, for each of these, who do they have a relationship with? And if we double click any of these, you'll see that each of them has, of course, more details here. And we can start fleshing this out by, for instance, adding new labels, saying, okay, we want to know what skills you actually have, and start detailing out other properties on top of this, which you typically do throughout an analysis project. But this is clearly a litigator. Just cancel out of this for now. So this is a very simple view of the organization, but there's a few other things. I'll actually start with the relationships tab and show you some of the analyses that we can do using all the data from such a survey. So this is the design structure matrix, just like Tim showed you in the presentation. It's currently aggregated to the team level. And you have different groups here doing different type of work. So like Tim mentioned, for instance, the litigation group here, there's 2% of people from the litigation group that is providing information to someone in the legislative council office. So you have a matrix on an aggregated level where we can break it down and look at the details after. But there's one thing that I would like to highlight just to begin with. You notice how most interfaces are here, or most communication between the teams, is either single-digit percentage, meaning there's very little communication between the teams to begin with, or there's not even any relationships between these teams reported at all. So what we find here initially is that this is a very siloed organization. They actually barely talk to each other. And I'll show you another interesting thing soon as well about how they actually communicate with this limited structure. But there's one exception. And that is the anti-discrimination law group and the energy and environmental law group. These two teams have more than 50% and is clearly an outlier. When you see a pattern like this, and we find this as well, we'll see it when we do an optimization, when we let Reconfig improve this design and give us a starting point. You'll see that this kind of pattern typically means there's some kind of sub-team here or hybrid team between these two groups that you can discover. They're already working in that fashion, but they're just not organized like that. So they have to create these informal structures to do their work, which of course, across department line, across team lines, across division lines is harder than if the organization was actually designed for their work. So we'll get back to that when we look at the design. But for now, I'm going to expand this matrix and look at the details, and I'll also add in the names again, so we can see how the detail, what level of detail do we get here. So there's a few things I can point out initially, and also, and if you hover over each of these relationships, you'll see that, I'll actually just bring up the model so it's easier to see. We have quite a lot of detail from the survey where we know how much time they spend together. We know the importance of this relationship. This is a permanent relationship, so it's not project-based, for instance. It's not scheduled to change anytime soon. We know that they meet once a month or less frequently, and they meet for typically less than an hour. Definitely not a strong relationship, but somehow this is still of medium importance. So this kind of relationship, when you see it and you dig into it, you get a lot of questions like, how is this medium importance, but you meet this rarely? Is it because the other person, like in this case, this was reported by Laura, but you see that both Zach and Laura has responded to the survey, that's the green status here, but only Laura reported this relationship. And it's of medium importance for her. What does she need from Zach that is so important, but so infrequent? And of course, we see which function, which is the top level here, and what activities this relationship is all about. Now, this is the level of detail that we get from running a survey with an organization. Getting this level of detail and this type of analysis by interview is a completely different beast. But as you see, as soon as you start looking at this data, you're going to have all the questions you need to set up a long list of interviews if you have the time and capacity. So let's stick with this this reported by for a moment, because you remember the assessments I mentioned. They had an accountabilities assessment where this Justice Department scored very low, right? There was essentially, it's all about, do you know what to do? And do you feel like you have the mandate to do what is needed to deliver on your work, right? Now, this reported by metric is something we found that you can use to identify these issues, both where are they most prevalent, who are the people that experience them, and how severe are they? And then you can start digging into it. So what we'll do is, you see this is only reported by one person, but then you have other relationships like here, where this relationship is reported by both of the people in this included in the relationship. So what we can do is add a filter up here to this matrix. We can put it on reported by and say, I want to have all the relationships that was only reported by one participant. So if you create this, you'll see that the relationship, the filter is created at the top here, and we can keep adding filters if we want. But these are the relationships that were reported by one person. And you'll see that, okay, you have, for instance, here, there's no longer any relationships. So within the energy group, energy and environment, they're clearly aligned. Everyone agrees that everyone is talking to everyone. It doesn't seem to be a big problem. But then you look at the interface between them and anti-discrimination. All of those relationships are reported by only one person. And then you find within the Legislative Council office, here, there's a lot of relationships only reported by one person, actually the majority. We should probably go talk to them and figure out what their mandate issues are, and so on. So you can keep digging into this and really pinpoint what are their frustrations. Is it unclear role descriptions? We don't know who to talk to. Is it that you're not able to get priority on your deliverables? So you're expecting information, but you're not getting it. So you have to remind and remind and remind. Like these kind of problem statements come up, and you can really identify them and track them down here. Yes, and I actually skipped the other assessment because we can see it here as well. And it's the simple fact that, so remember there was the other assessment they failed, which is the linking assessment. Are you able to communicate across the organization? Do you have the interfaces and access to the people you need in order to do your job? answer here is, just looking at the aggregated picture, is an instant no. Any question that goes across teams here will not be able to be fulfilled properly. And there's two things that come up here. One is there's barely any communication. So unless there's very few such questions, which we know from the initial problem statement, that's not the case. They don't have the capacity of communication between teams here to actually properly solve the cases. Any complex case will be hard to solve. Now, we can expand this again and add in the job title. And one thing that's very interesting is that we found in this case that the managing councils is actually the people that end up being the integrators of this organization. See how many of the relationships I just highlighted, but just by selecting the managing councils? Oh, there's another one here. Somehow they built an organization where communication across team was done by management, meaning you have a middleman for any case-based discussion across teams. That doesn't scale really well. And you, of course, get the whole problem of telephone. So this became the basis also for a lot of their linking issues that they reported in the diagnose module. And we could keep going through here. I mean, there's other tabs and deeper analysis that we can show. But I think at this point, in order not to complicate this, I would like to give the word back to Steve and open for a Q&A.
Great, thank you, Kim. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have a few minutes for Q&A. We have some in the chat. I'm gonna go to that and read those out and see if we can answer those for you. So we answered the first one. How long did it take to do this activity? So hopefully that answers some of your question. Which data was used to analyze? And Kim, I don't know if you've answered that or you want to maybe answer that a bit more.
Right. So the survey from the Discover module is definitely core to the project we did, Steve. That is a lot of the data that we had, especially in Reconfig. But you also had, and you can probably elaborate on what kind of data you added on top of the survey results to really correlate the findings, verify that these things were correct. Do you have something to add on top of what you see on screen here?
I'm sorry, say that, Kim?
So do you have some input on what type of data you guys use on top of the Reconfig survey?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Pinpoint on things, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, no, we didn't use any additional data or programs. Basically that the information that this engine, the Reconfig engine has was so powerful. There was so much data that it provided us that it was, you have to be, that this is where I as a client, we manage that data because there's so much it can get, they could get lost on that. So we were guided by the value stream process flow. This is how the business needs to operate. Now, what are the different organizational, models that this gives us? And then we started to dive into the data that pertain to what we wanted to achieve based on the one or two models that we selected. They conformed better. Actually, they align quite nicely with the value stream analysis design. So, and then we dove into some of that data that he says, why is this player talking to this? How come they're not interacting more and this and that? So we started to dive into that, but that was more than enough information that we were provided. So yeah, that worked out very nice.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
And if I remember correctly, from your value stream analysis there, you were, for instance, able to identify a standard set of roles that were key for communication between regions and production lines and that kind of thing, where a pattern came up, these roles were required for proper, like you saw the well-functioning regional management had certain roles with a certain communication pattern that you were then able to learn from and roll out to the other regions to help them improve their communication and efficiency, essentially.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is the other thing that it was, again, we can't cover everything in this few minutes, but we looked at this modeling not only from the entire North American operations, but then we also broke it down by region. So they were able to pull up, West region, how do they run? Southern region, how do they run? So we looked at the different regions, and it was interesting. One region aligned so much neater and tighter to the value stream thinking or the value stream analysis future state that it almost became like with some adjustments, almost became like a model. Says, these guys are really close to what Reconfig is telling us. Not, we have to make a number of adjustments, but that was the other thing that was very nice. It allowed you to look at the big picture and then bring it down to the smaller regional picture, or whatever size you need to look at. But that was very powerful. So that worked out really nice for them. So
yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna go here another question. During the merger process, how was the linking/connection and responsibility matrix between the two teams derived? Kim, I think that's.
Did we already answer that then? So
yeah,
essentially,
I thought we did. I just want to make sure that if we need to expand.
Yeah,
Okay.
Essentially it's as simple as when you run a discover process, you generate the matrix by clicking one button, and then you get this picture.
Yeah.
And you're able to go and start adapting it. You can pull people between teams and start saying, Michael here should be working up in legislative council office because, yeah, he's currently alone. He's a free agent as management, but he should really be working with the people he's really attached to. So that, not sure if that's the full answer, but happy to elaborate on it.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to that picture you have there in front is that was very essential for the leadership. When we got the executives in a room and we looked at the models, and they started asking, like, what about this person? How come they're not doing X, Y, and Z? And we started to talk through a little deeper into the what the modeling was telling us, and which is very factual, by the way. And of course, what the value stream says, this is how you need to run the business. Then, we started to take the designs that Reconfig provided and be able to move some of the chess pieces around or look at it specifically the relationship amongst these. So these were very powerful too, very visual tools that the executives where it was very good for them to see and be able to understand, which made it, they weren't in the dark in terms of what the data was telling us. So it was very, very useful to make decisions. And it wasn't, we didn't take these models, by the way, and say, well, this is it. This is what you guys have to do. It wasn't like that. It was, this is what the data recommends. This is how we're interacting with each other. And there's a lot of opportunity, and this is how we run the business. So let's bring those two together as best as we can. And it's interesting, we looked at it in phases, like, okay, phase one, we're gonna make these adjustments to the org structure. Phase two, we're gonna even further make those adjustments. And phase three, we're gonna have fully integrated some components of the business and departments. So it wasn't a big bang approach. It was something that we moved towards to make sure that people, that the processes were also, the new ones were also in place as the organizational structure was being migrated towards that direction. So it was a process that was followed.
And you were able to use the same database data with the changes throughout the project as a baseline, referring back to it when you moved between the phases and really ground the whole project in a database approach, really sticking to the facts, which also, of course, creates a lot of transparency.
Yes, it
You
did.
can explain why and what will happen at a completely different scale than can without this kind of data.
You know, what's interesting too, and I'm gonna, and by the way, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. We got a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap it up. But one of the, I think one of the interesting things as when the data came out and we were starting to study the data along the value stream analysis is that the data would tell you things that leadership wasn't really aware of in some cases, in terms of certain vacuums in the organization that people thought were being that were in place in terms of how people communicated, how people interacted. You know, value stream thinking is all about team collaboration, regardless of the department. And when we looked at this reconfig, it showed the lack of collaboration, or sometimes over collaboration, because it was like everybody was involved for the same thing in the same meeting. It was so that allowed them to see that, and I think it brought a different light that allowed some of the department leaders that were not affected by the value stream improvement to go back and look at how their teams were interacting. And it was very useful for them also to be able to do that as well. So it helped in many fronts. Yeah. All right. Let's see. I think there's one question, which is how's that decomposition done, taking into account the value streams? I don't know if I can, if I understand the question properly. I mean, maybe Kim, you can jump in, but I'm just going to say from this angle here is that we did the value stream analysis independent of like Reconfig. Like we were doing both in parallel. It's not like we waited for Reconfig to come back with the models and okay, based on that, let's do a value stream analysis, or or the other way around. We did them both in parallel. It's like, this is how the business needs to operate, regardless of how you're structured and organized. And then Reconfig looked at it and said, well, this is how you're currently organized. Here's where people interact and don't interact. And based on that, there's a lot of opportunity in terms of people utilization and communications. So they provided some models of how people should collaborate, whether you format as a formal department, or whether you just call that, you know, ad hoc collaborative teams. Regardless, this is how you need to optimize your people in the execution of your business. So we brought those two together, and that's the analysis piece that we did with them, by the way. And there was no surprises to anybody. I mean, to the technician out on the field, to the quality person, the program manager, whoever was the senior leader, executive VP, they were all in this, even the top leadership within those regions. So everybody knew what we were doing was to optimize how we work together. So then at the analysis piece was when we brought those together, and we started looking at a more tactical level how things should line up. But hopefully that answer. I know, Kim, if you need to add anything to that.
Steve, this was actually a quite advanced question, because this is by our partner in Belgium, Innocom, by Peter. So he knows this. He knows how complicated this is. And in the case that Kim was presenting, we ended up with like a decomposition into 1,000 activities, which was really hard to manage. So ultimately, what happened was that lawyers work for certain departments. Lawyers go either to court or they draft contracts, and they're all in love with their own field of expertise. And that means that you have like a three-dimensional matrix. And now it becomes more of an art than a science, because now, in this case, our consultants had to find a way to make it simpler and already do some high-level designs. Now, when Steve was using the tool, he was using Reconfig 1.0, and that didn't have that whole front end with all the modules. So the current Reconfig 2.0 provides a lot of support to do the decomposition from your purpose or mission into your capabilities and functions, into your activities. It's still more of an art than a science, but we do provide some support doing that actual process and going through multiple iterations. Because what happened in this particular case that was presented, we got it wrong first, and then we had to change it. So you do multiple iterations. It's not like you're gonna hit the bullseye immediately. You need to go through a few times testing it out. There's actually a testing group that was commenting on how we did this decomposition first time. Peter, does that kind of answer the question, or you want to comment on it yourself?
You have to unmute him. Let me unmute him.
I mean, the things that keep coming up in Reconfig projects. To the last question here as well, just so we have answered it. How long does it typically take to configure the tool for the survey? Not from a technical standpoint, from a Reconfig standpoint, not long at all. All you need is a CSV file with the activities and the participants, and you can set it up in less than an hour. But the process and discussion with the client is typically what takes time. So to see a 2 to 4 week lead time before you end up setting up a survey, not uncommon at all. And for a typical Reconfig project, it spans anywhere from 5 to 13 weeks. Not because there's a lot of hours in the actual technical work, but because you have so many discussions, workshops, all the activities next to it that you guys are the experts at, that drive this timeline. The maturity of the understanding of the stakeholders, of the customer, that kind of thing, is really what governs how long a project takes.
I unmuted the attendees. So Peter, if you can unmute yourself now, I think, if you want to clarify your question. Or
yeah, I think you answered at least partly. It's a difficult thing, I think, because indeed you have your value streams on the one side. The question was more about how did you manage to visualize that in the tool, that you obtain some kind of a value stream aligned organization, because I guess that's what your intention was, in fact. So if you looked at it separately, I guess then somewhere in the definition or the decomposition of functions activities, you took into account the value stream stage or something like that, maybe.
yeah.
So I was looking how you managed to link both worlds.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. Again, Reconfig offers something that I wanted to make sure that we came, that it wasn't a blind test, if you will. And what we did is we looked at the outputs of the Reconfig tool. By the way, it wasn't just, I mean, they showed me, we walked through some scenarios and, like, okay, this is what we need to answer the key questions. But the outputs of the tool actually would provide, again, the tool doesn't know how should the business be running based on their current structure. The tool, it's the artificial intelligence of the tool tells you, based on these functions and based how people obviously work, this is how they need to collaborate together. Now, whether you make that a department or not, or whatever that's going to be, right? And what happens is with the value stream analysis is really asking the same question. It's like, to deliver this flow to your customer, regardless of the department, don't worry about that, right? How should that work? How should that flow, and who should interact to deliver that flow? Who should collaborate? Who should own what? Those pieces of it, and it was very similar output of Reconfig versus what the value stream analysis was telling us. It wasn't perfect, obviously there's a lot of stuff in there, but it was enough to us to look at it and say, yeah, if we start to collaborate these groups together. And by the way, there were some things the value stream tool did not tell us that Reconfig told us. It's just because it's data analytics, it's AI. So there were a lot of things that the value stream analysis tool didn't show, that we looked at that and said, okay, we didn't think about this. In fact, this did not come up. What about this other area of service that wasn't even mentioned by the team during the VSA? So there was a lot of that interactiveness that took place. And that's why Peter also, it wasn't like a big bang approach on implementation. It's like, okay, let's go to this phase one. And as we implement it, we learn a lot from it. And then we went to phase 2 and phase 3. So progressively you learn to understand better what the tool, both of these tools are telling us. And as we start to see it come to life, it even got better as it was executed. So it was a lot of, it was good analysis, I would say that. Good interactive dialogue with the leadership.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
And
Okay,
to your
so
point, Steve,
go ahead.
you mentioned it so many times that I'll be remiss and regret it if I don't show what this an AI actually is now. I got to show the screen. So I'll steal 1 minute to do that at the end because I didn't do it during the demo. So in the design module, you'll see we have different cards. Now I've created the same analysis here for demo a few times, as you can see, but you have a let reconfig design button here, which is what Steve's talking about. So if you click that, you'll get a configuration screen. You can select a data set. Now we can do the survey data set that we just had. You can then filter down, and to Peter's point, if you want to focus on, let's say you have value streams here as the functions, right? Maybe it's some kind of logistics value chain, production value chain, so forth. You can filter the whole thing down to one value chain, multiple value chain, optimize the whole organization around those value chains. You can configure a lot of this to say we don't want to duration stability. We don't want to include project-based relationships in the design of the future organization, so we can do that. All this kind of thing. And then you have a profile here, which lets you choose what type of organization you're interested in. If you're a manufacturing organization, you probably want a more independent structure, meaning you're okay with larger units, but you want them to deliver as much of the value chains as independently as possible. A lot of handover to different departments, different divisions is not what you want, because you can standardize a lot of the work. But on the other hand, like in this legal example, lawyers are not working through a standardized process. So here, maybe you want to go more in the spirit of agile and create a more lean setup. You want tight-knit, smaller teams, but you're perfectly okay with more communication across teams. So you can adjust what type of organization you want to promote. And if we run this optimization now, it's going to take some time, and then Reconfig is going to give you a data set like we have here, which is already finished. And if I open that, you'll see that we have new names for the different units. For instance, now we have anti-discrimination, energy, and law environment. So Reconfig has been working with the wording and trying to create sensible new names. What it's telling us is that it combined the anti-discrimination and energy and law groups into one group, which, if you remember how the matrix looked, makes sense. Like there was a strong interface there, so that's sensible, right? So you'll get this kind of data set back. And to point out one other interesting thing that actually showed up here, and it showed up in Steve's project as well, you'll find groups like this. Why are there a bunch of people here that are in a group, but they don't have any relationships? This is actually a very useful phenomenon that Reconfig identifies. Yes, it was able to combine the teams and give them the sub-team that they were interested in. But you also have this kind of structure, which is interestingly enough telling you that you have free agents in your organization that don't really belong anywhere. If you were to put these people into larger teams, you're going to increase the size of the team, but reduce cohesion in that team so much that it's actually a detriment. So either you need to promote more collaboration for these free agents, or you need to actually create a separate structure for them and give them that kind of approach. Now, this is not the kind of structure we ended up with for the Justice Department, but we were able to instead create more of a front office, back office organization based off of a lot of the customer type analysis we did. And they are now working to transition into that kind of market-driven organization. like they wanted to at the beginning of the project.
Great.
So with that, Steve, thank you. Now I got to show off the AI as well.
Thank you. All right, guys, so we got 5 minutes. I'm going to close it up here. So let me show my screen here. Hold on. Okay. All right, so this is just for reference. The video, if you're interested in the recording, we're gonna access. You can access that through our websites, Reconfigs or Leading North. We're also gonna have it on YouTube at some point, but that'll be also there for you if you want to share it with the peers who just want to take a look at it again. If you have any questions or just want to understand it a little bit better, feel free to reach out to either Tim or myself. There's our emails. Or through LinkedIn, you know, feel free to shoot us a note, and anything we can do to provide you additional insights or answer any questions, we'll be more than glad to do that. So with that, I think this is the conclusion of the session. We thank you so much for attending, and again, we look forward to hearing from you. And if you have anything you'd like to comment, feel free to shoot us a note. Thank you all. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.